Hi, my name is Lauren, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make stained glass hangings. I've been working with stained glass since 2007, when my high school art teacher asked his students if anyone would be interested in making panels for the school. I worked with another student for 3 years of high school on the 5 panels shown here and began work on 5 more before I graduated. Those panels are close to being finished by a currently enrolled student. So before we get started, you're going to need to grab whatever pattern you want. You can make an original pattern, or you can just find one that you like. I chose Thorin Oakenshield's crest from The Hobbit because he's one of my favorite characters, and I really like that movie. So after you're done choosing your piece, you're going to decide what colors you want. What I did is I took markers and I colored the different pieces to what colors I wanted them to be. For example, I have this blue inside here, and I have white in here, and I have a brown outside here. Since he goes by Oakenshield, I decided to put a brown in here to reflect a sort of woody type of feel. After that, you're going to want to number your different pieces that you have in here so you can keep track of which ones are which when you're cut. This will make more sense when we cut the glass. Then after you're done with your pattern and coloring it and everything, you're going to want to print out a second piece and then cut it according to the lines that you have for your pattern. Over here is where I'm going to be cutting or tracing my patterns. For example, we have Sharpie. Use just a regular Sharpie because it'll just wash right off, so you don't have to worry about getting it all over your glass. Just hold down your pattern and trace it all along your glass here. And do that with all the pieces. And number it, whatever number it is. This one is 35. If your glass has a pattern, like this pretty blue I have does, always make sure to trace out your pattern pieces on the flat side here. It'll make it a lot easier to cut, instead of this ripply side here. Now we're going to get on to one of my favorite parts, which is cutting the glass. For this, you're definitely going to want to have some safety goggles. And also, some good old closed-toed shoes. I'm going to be honest with you. Cutting glass isn't really as badass or as hardcore as it sounds, but it's still pretty cool. To start off, you're going to need a glass cutter. This one has a little reservoir that has a bunch of oil in it already. If you don't have one of these, definitely invest in some oil, or I just use WD-40. Glass cutters have these funky little tips. It's got a wheel on the end, and that's how you score your glass, which tells the glass where to break. For starters, just take your glass cutter with the wheel and run it along the edge. That ugly sound you just heard, you want that sound. That means your glass is going to cut nice and evenly. So once your glass, you have a little score mark here. You're going to take some glass cutters. For straight lines, I like to use these big heavy-duty cutters right here. What it does is it forces the glass into 2 separate pieces. You could also use your hands, but that makes me kind of nervous because I'm not wearing gloves. So you put it right here and make sure your cut is on this line, and you press, and it breaks. Just like that. And now you have your piece of glass. And you're just going to want to do this with the rest of these pieces to cut them out. This is another little cutter that I like to use. It's for grabbing small pieces and pulling them off. It has these 2 different shaped guys right here. You want to make sure the curved one is on the top and the flat one's on the bottom. And here's your finished piece. When you're done cutting, you're probably going to have a bunch of little shards, so take them and put them into a paper bag because they'll just poke right out of a plastic bag. They're pretty sharp, so be careful. Now that I have all my pieces cut out, I'm going to work on grinding the glass. First, you're going to need to set up your grinder. So, what you have to do is take some water and just pour it in. I'm not sure how much I'm going to need, so we'll see here. I think this whole cup's going to do it. There we go. That'll work. Now, I'm going to need to take the sponge out and get it wet. It just pops out like this. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult. There we go. Got it. Just wet it. I'm just wetting it in the bottom here. It's easier. Almost in. There we go. And we're all good. So then you put your sponge back into your sponge holder. After much finagling, you can set it back in here. And the sponge is there so to keep your bit dry. This bit has diamond on it, and it really just grinds the glass down nice. I've got piece number 35 here again. What you're going to want to do is grind all the way down to the inside of the Sharpie line. The Sharpie line on the inside is where your pattern piece, exactly how big it was, so that's where you want to go to make sure everything fits nice and properly. And you're definitely going to need some safety goggles for this one because glass dust is going to be flying everywhere. Then you just turn your grinder on and wet the bit. And here we go. As you grind all your pieces, you're going to want to start putting them together, going from the inside outward and pinning them in place with these aluminum pins. I've already got my pieces all ground and fit together, so now it's time to work on the foiling process. While copper foiling is a pretty straightforward process, it can definitely take a while to get the hang of. On the back side of your foil, you have a paper adhesive. And what you're going to want to do is pull the adhesive off. You're going to want to pull the adhesive off and start attaching it to the side of your glass, like this. I like to start like this near a corner, and then you wrap it around. And it's self-adhesive, so it sticks. And when you get to the end, just rip it off. It rips pretty easily, and stick it down. After that, you take the excess that'll be around the edges and just squish it down onto the piece of glass. You might get some pointy parts that'll kind of hurt, but once we actually force it down with a flat edge, it will look and feel a lot nicer. The reason you want to foil the glass is because the solder that we're going to use to stick the pieces together doesn't stick to glass in and of itself, so you have to put this metal along here so the solder will stick and the pieces will actually stay together. I've got this handy dandy little foil presser here. For what you're going to want to do with these is just put it on the ground or something, which is what I'm going to do, and just press down the sides, press down the edges here on all the sides to make sure that everything sticks and doesn't come off. And it looks nicer too. And this way you can get those ugly pointy things that can really hurt when they stick into you. I'm going to do this with the rest of my pieces, so sit tight for a minute. Okay, now it's time to solder your piece together now that you've got everything all foiled out and put together back in its original place. For soldering, you're going to need Q-tips, flux, either paste flux or liquid flux will work. And you're going to need solder itself, definitely safety goggles again, and a soldering iron. I like to set my soldering iron to about between 6 and 7 out of the 10 different settings, because that works nicely and it doesn't get too hot so that it cracks the glass. Alright, let's begin. So, the first thing you're going to want to do is open up your flux. Flux it can come in a lot of different colors. I like this one. It's just a regular old paste, but you don't want to get it in your eyes or on your skin because it can cause some irritation and that's really annoying. So what you're going to want to do is take a Q-tip, dip it in your flux. I like to just wiggle it around in here, get it nice and coated. Like that. Looks kind of like a booger actually. That's pretty gross. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to just put it on your foil. What flux does is it helps the solder to stick and makes it not bubble as it goes along the copper. So I'm getting some good use out of all this flux, so I'm just going to go all the way around here. Okay, now that I've got this piece all soldered around, I'm going to take my soldering iron. Oh, first, safety goggles. Okay, we're good. Now I want to take my soldering iron. Actually, no. First I'm going to want to undo this because that's kind of the point of the whole thing. You're going to want to unroll your solder. Definitely wash your hands after working with this stuff because it does contain lead, and lead is poisonous. So, yeah. You're going to want to get a nice tip of solder out like this. Take your soldering iron, put it a little bit above the tip, and just push in, melt it off, and get a nice bead. You're going to want to pull that bead as far down as you can. Make sure to do this in a well-ventilated area. I'm currently doing this in my garage with the garage door open, because these fumes are not something you want to have in your body. And just go all the way around. And if it looks kind of weird, that's not an issue because you can go back and fix it later because it'll just remelt. And the reason it looks so nice and smooth like that is because of the flux. Because it's not bubbling or anything. I'm just going to take this bead and run it along here once more. Alright, and that's this piece done. So I'm going to do this to the rest of the piece, and you're going to want to do both the front and the back side so it stays nice and strong. When you're done soldering, I took a fine jewelry wire and I soldered it to the actual piece itself. Now I'm using the piece that I originally decided was going to be the front as the back because the back ended up actually turning out nicer during the soldering, so that's fine. And now what we're going to do is we're going to polish it. So you're going to want to take some steel wool and just rub it all over it on both sides. And get it in all the cracks and crevices. There we go, see, it takes off all that permanent marker. Now for the other side. Now I'm going over to a slightly cleaner area of my workspace, and this is the time that we're going to use to wax and polish it. I'm just using some good old turtle wax for the super hard shell car wax. And what you're going to need is a damp rag, and you're going to want to take a small amount and put it right on, oh, that's a lot, okay, well, we can use that for the whole thing. And just rub it all over. And make sure, again, to get it in all the cracks and crevices. And on the bottle it says to let it dry to a haze. So that's what we're going to do. Now that it's dried, you don't want to wait too long. I probably waited a good minute. You're going to want to take a soft cloth and just rub it all off. Alright, the back looks pretty good. Now it's time to do the front. And I'm just going to do that by myself. Now you're going to hang your piece up. So what I did is I bought one of these suction cup guys with a hook at my local glass store, but you can just get it at a craft store probably. So you take your piece and just hang it with the jewelry wire. And position it how you want it. Here we go.